Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants will be in a listen-only mode until the question-answer session. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. With that, it is my pleasure to turn over today's call to Mr. Anthony Hill. You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me on this webinar on cashing in with free trade agreements. I really appreciate your presence and hope that this will be beneficial to you. As the operator may have mentioned earlier, if you're having any difficulties, you can press *0 to get an operator, or if you're having technical problems getting onto the visual portion with the PowerPoint slides, you can call 1-800-857-8777 to get help. Now, this webinar, as you may know, is part of a series related to the Basic Guide to Exporting, which is a book put out by the Department of Commerce to help people to begin exporting. This is also in relation to the National Export Initiative, which is an initiative by the administration to increase exports from the United States. And the goal is to double exports in 5 years. So we are really trying to get out there and encourage people to export and let them know how to export, especially with people that haven't done it before and want to start. We've done these webinars before, but we're really starting a big push in trying to get more people interested, and just let people know that help is there through the Department of Commerce and the Commercial Service. So we hope that this will encourage you to export more. Now, just a quick note, there are other webinars coming up related to this. The next one is next week, in fact, and it's on how to write an export plan. And then a week later, there is another one on how to find HS codes, duties and taxes. And then on how to ship the following. On December 1st, there's another one on how to ship. So all of these are there to help you increase your exports. Now, if you're not aware, the Commercial Service is a part of the Department of Commerce, and it's an agency that is here to help U.S. companies export. So we have quite a number of resources available to you, including market research and some more sophisticated services like helping match you with potential foreign buyers. Now, please know that there is a local export assistance center near you. We have offices located throughout the United States, and we have offices located throughout the world. And those international offices are actually U.S. government offices that are affiliated with the consulates and embassies. And what they do is they do market research in the country of question, and they can reach out to local potential buyers and match them with U.S. suppliers. So if you need any help, please contact your local Export Assistance Center, or you can call the phone number at the bottom of the first slide, 1-800-USA-TRADE. And all of our information can also be found on www.export.gov. Now, we'll go ahead and start. Now, quick agenda. We're going to have some background information about free trade agreements. I'm going to talk about researching opportunities in free trade agreement countries. And then we will talk about cashing in with the tariff rate benefits. Now, just so you know, this is a list of the current free trade agreements that are in force: Israel, NAFTA, Jordan, and so on. Now you can see a lot of people aren't aware that the U.S.'s first free trade agreement was with Israel in 1985, and then NAFTA came into effect in '94, and then after that, there was a big, period where a long period where we didn't have any, and then we began with Jordan again, and then quite a few other countries. Later on, when we talk about documenting for free trade agreements, you'll see that Israel and NAFTA, those require more restrictive they have more restrictive documentation requirements, whereas later on, the documentary requirements became more relaxed. And let's see, CAFTA, Central American Free Trade Agreement, and the Dominican Republic includes these countries, and these are the years in which the agreement was ratified for those countries. And there are 3 free trade agreements that are pending approval by Congress. You may have heard about those. So there are quite a few countries around the world with which the U.S. has free trade agreements, and this is a quick snapshot picture of where they are. And we did start negotiations with Malaysia on a free trade agreement. That has been basically put on hold, and right now you may have heard about negotiations for a Trans-Pacific partnership. That's really in flux right now, meaning a lot of countries that are talking about joining, and so it's ongoing, but it's probably going to take a while because it's going to be seems like it's going to be a big multilateral agreement. And there's some quick percentages to show you that free trade agreements have made a difference in U.S. exports. So what I've done is I've calculated the year-on-year increase in exports before the agreement, before the FTA went into effect, and then year-on-year increase after the FTA went into effect. So, of course, there could be other factors involved, but before and after, for these countries and agreements, there was a large increase in U.S. exports. So now, as you know, free trade agreements do include the elimination of tariffs, but they also include agreements on these other topics, such as services, on government procurement, on intellectual property right protection, on investment. Now, for services and government procurement, well, in investment as well, the main idea with those parts of the agreements is that the U.S. company providing services or bidding on a government contract should have the same equal treatment to a local company. So this helps U.S. companies compete in the marketplace. And the agreements also have sections on customs coordination and on labor standards and on environmental standards. And here you have information on the Trade Compliance Center, which is another part of the Commerce Department. Now, if you have any problems with access to a particular country relating to their not complying with a free trade agreement, you can actually make a complaint through to this agency, and they can help you following up and making sure that you do have equal access and that the government is abiding by their agreement. So how do you cash in with free trade agreements? Now, obviously with any export activity, with any type of sales, the main thing that cannot be stressed enough or too much is doing the market research. And this is where the commercial service can help out a lot. So after you've done the market research, then you can determine which countries you want to focus on, right? Because there are so many free trade agreements, and they all of these countries are different markets and would require different products and different pricing. So once you've determined which countries to focus on, then you can determine how to qualify your product for the tariff benefits, and that's where you're really cashing in, because you will have a price advantage against competition from non-FTA countries. So you'll with that price advantage, you'll be able to sell more, obviously. So I want to talk a little bit about market research. We have, as I mentioned before, we have market research on export.gov, where there is free country commercial guides and other industry reports. Now, you also have trade data that you should look at, and there are 3 sources of trade data here. These are all government sources. The Census Bureau collects trade data, but the U.S. International Trade Commission also has trade data on their website. And then there is Trade Stats Express. So, obviously the point of looking at trade data is to see where products are going currently, and you can use that to determine where you want to focus your efforts. It's difficult to focus on all the countries, right? And it's really not focusing then. So you want to figure out which ones would be best for you. Now, obviously, again, you may want to figure out which countries are purchasing more of your product, or you may want to focus on the country where your type of product is not being sold that much, and maybe you think that's an opportunity for you. Now, I went through some of the country commercial guides for free trade agreements countries and just put together some very quick information. In each of the country commercial guides, there is a section that lists the leading sectors for U.S. exports. So it's basically the sectors where there's the greatest opportunity for U.S. companies to sell their products. And now, these are the sectors that are listed for Canada and Mexico. And you can find that for each of the countries that have FTAs, or any country that has a country commercial guide. This should help you. You go through the commercial guides and determining which countries might be best for you. Now, obviously, this is just, an opinion of a commercial specialist in that country, but this doesn't, having your industry on here or having it not be on this list doesn't mean your product would not sell well. So, definitely do other market research, but this should help you get started. Now, here we have some Central American countries and the Dominican Republic. List of those leading export sectors. El Salvador and Guatemala, leading export sectors, again, for CAFTA DR. Now you can see a lot of these, there are some similarities, somewhat similar markets maybe. This is just to give you a feel for the market research that's there and how you can focus your efforts. So Israel, here's the first bullet is the leading export sectors, but I wanted to make note that the agreement with Israel does not cover Gaza or the West Bank. And for Jordan, there's leading export sectors, and then I wanted to note that this is the first agreement that included environmental and labor standards part of the agreement. Now, Morocco, I'm getting into the Middle East and North Africa, obviously, and here we have Morocco, Oman, and then Bahrain. So there's a number of countries around the world with which we have free trade agreements. Here, Chile. Chile is a separate agreement, and we have that list there. And then Singapore. Singapore is a good market for U.S. products, and last but not least, Australia. Here's Peru also. Peru is one of the most recent agreements that has gone into effect. And here's a list of leading export sectors. Okay, so as I mentioned, I just wanted to go through quickly the market research because what we'll mainly focus is qualifying your product for the tariff benefits. And we mentioned there are other benefits with the free trade agreement, but what people mostly know about is the tariff rate benefits. Now this, it'll get a little bit technical, but we're going to go through these steps, and hopefully this will help you understand. As we have so many agreements, I try to simplify it so that it's beneficial to you, and just know that this webinar is a basic guide to free trade agreements. So I try not to get too technical, but some of the stuff is a little technical, and if you have problems with it, you can contact me later. But with any type of exporting or international trade, the first step is going to apply, determining the Harmonized Tariff Code. What is the Harmonized Code? It's a 6 to 10-digit number that basically classifies products that are shipped internationally. Now, in the 6 to 10 digits is the harmonized portion of the code. Now, you may see a number that's, well, the 6 digits is the harmonized portion. The first 6 digits is harmonized, and then if it's 8 digits to 10 digits, then that is a specific code for a country. In the U.S., 10-digit code for categorizing products is the Schedule B number. So you can find codes at the Census through the Census Bureau. They have Schedule B numbers. And if you, as I mentioned, if you have a Schedule B number that's 10 digits, basically just the first 6 digits is going to be the harmonized code. But that should help you, as far as shipping goes. At least you'll have the 6 digits. And quickly, the first 2 digits is the chapter, and that is it's a more generalized category. And then as you add more numbers, the categories become more specific. And the 4 digits is called a heading. And then adding more numbers again, 9608.10, you have 6 digits for the harmonized code. That is a more specific subcategory, and they call that a subheading. So this is going to be important in any type of shipping for you to know your harmonized tariff code. Step 1 is finished. Now next is determining whether there is an actual tariff rate benefit. Now the basic idea with the tariff rates is that in an agreement, in a free trade agreement, ultimately all tariffs between countries would be eliminated, but sometimes the tariff rate to a country without the free trade agreement may already be 0. So if the tariff rate without the free trade agreement is 0, then there's no extra benefit normally for you to qualify under the free trade agreement. So what I mean here, I'm comparing the normal tariff rate against the free trade agreement rate, right? So if the normal tariff rate is 0, and then the FTA rate is 0, then there's no tariff benefit. Now the FTA rate, if the MFN rate, most favored nation rate, is greater than the FTA rate, then there would be a tariff benefit. Now, sometimes the FTA rates do not go down to 0 immediately. I mentioned a minute ago that ultimately they would go down to 0, but sometimes governments want to gradually decrease their tariff rates. And it basically gives their domestic industry a chance to adjust to the importing competition. So for some products, the tariffs would be reduced over time, and you would want to know what the current tariff rate is under the free trade agreement in order for you to determine what the tariff rate benefit is going to be. So you can find tariff rates on export.gov or by calling 1-800-USA-TRADE. And you can find tariff elimination schedules on export.gov/FTA. And we're going to talk more at the USTR.gov. Tariff elimination schedules. Now, this is the schedule by which the tariffs are going to be reduced. So they're going to be reduced over a period of time, and the schedule will have a letter code, which is called a staging category. The letter code signifies the period of time for reducing the tariff rates. And the reduction of tariff rates is going to be based on the rate that was in effect when the agreement went into force. So they're going to be reduced over a period of time again, and it's going to be reduced from the tariff rate that's in effect when the agreement goes into force. And what it's going to be a letter code that you're going to look for. So here is an example of what I'm talking about. This is the tariff elimination schedule for the agreement with Australia. Usually it's going to be kind of a spreadsheet-looking thing with columns and rows, and there's going to be a column that has the Harmonized Code, right? And you're going to find the product. You're going to find your product's Harmonized Code in this column. And then there's going to be, normally there's a description somewhere in the middle there. And then there's going to be a column that shows the base rate. Here you can see that circled, and the base rate for a lot of these in this example was 5%. Now, and then there's going to be a column, which you see to the right, called a staging category. And then there's a letter code. The letter code signifies when the duty rate goes down to 0 from this base rate of 5%. Now, letter code A normally signifies that the rate goes down to 0 automatically, and that is the case with this agreement. So for this product, the rate went down to 0 as soon as the agreement went into effect. Now here we have another example from the Australian elimination schedule. Here these are different types of durable footwear incorporating a protective metal toe cap. You can see that. And the base rate for some of these was 15%. And here you can see there are some different staging categories, such as D, E, or A. look on one of the E's, you can see the base rate for the letter E was 0. This E stands for the fact that, well, it stands for a product that already had 0 tariff rate. So before the agreement went into effect, this product already had a 0 rate, and so there's no reduction needed. It's going to remain 0 after the agreement goes into effect. But what is D here? Category B, C, and D for Australia, they're listed here. Now B, you can see, has 4 equal stages. They always begin on the date the agreement goes into effect, and each stage is on January 1st of each year. So each year there'll be another equal reduction in the tariff rate. And then the primary difference between these categories is the number of stages, or basically the number of years. Category C, it goes down in 8 stages. Category D, and we saw there was a Category D product in that last example, it goes down to 0 over 10 years. So you can see here for a Category C and a Category D, there would still be some tariff on those products going to Australia. And you would need to know that in order to figure out what your tariff rate benefit would be. Now, as another example, here's Category B and C from the CAFTA-DR Tariff Elimination Schedule. The point of showing you this is to let you know that the staging categories are very specific to each agreement. So here you can see B is 5 stages and C is 10. Now I'm going to go back to Australia, where you can see again B here is 4, C is 8, and D is 10. So it's really important to know the definition for each category and the category for your product. And you can find this information on export.gov/FTA. And here's an example of the elimination schedule for Costa Rica. Now again, it looks a little bit different, right? But there is this column that has the Harmonized Codes on the left. There's the description in Spanish. And then, it has all the same columns, has the base rates, and has the staging categories, right? So you see A, B, C. Now A again it's almost always, I don't think I've seen it without where it wasn't this, but A is normally something that goes down to 0 as soon as the agreement goes into effect. And a lot of these are A, but there are some C's and B's and M's. And you would need to know the definition for each of those letters. And again, you can find that at export.gov/FTA. And the definitions, you would need those. You would need the schedules and the definitions to know what the current rate would be. Now, remember, what we're doing is we're determining what the tariff rate benefit is going to be for your product. So you can know, how much of a so you can know whether it's going to be beneficial to you to qualify your product under the agreement. And if the tariff rate is, 0.5% or 1% versus 0% under the agreement, it's up to you, but you're going to have to determine if it's going to be worthwhile for you to qualify your product. And sometimes qualifying can be kind of easy. sometimes it's not so easy. It can be a little bit technical, kind of like doing the tariff benefit calculation. So next step is probably one of the most important, is determine how to qualify. With FTAs, there are basically two types of agreements. And before we proceed on to these, I want to make one major point, which is for any agreement, if the product contains all U.S. materials, parts and materials from the United States, and no foreign materials, then it automatically qualifies. So that's what I mean by it can sometimes be easy. I mean, if your product is entirely U.S. made, then it definitely qualifies automatically. Okay. The technical or more difficult part of qualifying is when you have some minor foreign materials involved, or even, you know, there are some cases where you could have all foreign materials. But if you do enough processing in the U.S., then you can still qualify. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So, two types of agreements. The first type is where there are two generally applied rules. These generally applied rules are substantial transformation and value added. Now, Israel, Jordan, Morocco, Bahrain, and Oman. These agreements are of this type, where you have generally applied rules. Now, the other type of agreement includes product-specific rules. Now, this means that each product has a specific rule that allows it to qualify if it has foreign materials. Again, we're talking about something with foreign materials. Now, the product-specific rules are part of these agreements that I listed below: NAFTA, Chile, Singapore, Peru, Australia, and CAFTA-DR. We're going to first go through the first type of agreement with generally applied rules. Substantial. Remember, there's these two terms: substantial transformation and value added. Again, here the product will qualify if it's entirely U.S. origin or only U.S. materials. But if there is some foreign materials, the product can still qualify if it has undergone substantial transformation and it has at least 35% U.S. value added, right? So if you got some foreign materials, it just needs to meet these two rules: substantial transformation and 35% value added. Now, substantial transformation is a little bit of a subjective definition, but here are some examples. It basically means, you know, if you've brought in some foreign materials in, the foreign materials have to be changed in some significant way to make it a new product. Here are some examples I mentioned of that: glass sheet to a car windshield, wood to a wood chair, etc. Now, the other part of that rule, or of this type of agreement, it requires 35% value added, but it's such a low percentage, basically because it includes direct materials and direct costs of processing. So at least 35% of the direct materials and processing have to be from the U.S. And we're talking about 35% of the customs value. So that's quickly the first type of agreement, remember, substantial transformation and value added are required for these, basically all of the Middle Eastern country agreements. And then you have now the product-specific rules where it may require a tariff shift or and value added or both. In this type of agreement, you'll normally see something called a preference criteria. And I've listed here the primary 3 criteria that you'll see. The preference criteria are basically just the criteria for how the product will qualify under the agreement. And normally there's going to be a letter associated with each of these, and there's going to be and these are the primary ones that are used. And a lot of questions that I get or problems that people have relate to, what's the difference between these preference criteria, right? So they sort of sound the same. A says wholly obtained in the territory, and C says produced in the territory only with originating materials. It seems a little bit the same, but I'm going to explain to you the basic difference. A is reserved for agricultural products and natural resources. When it says wholly obtained or produced, what it's really referring to is that there's absolutely no foreign elements in this product, meaning there's no foreign iron, no plastic, no foreign anything in that. In fact, the best way to think about it is if you're under category A, that means every molecule in that product was sourced from the U.S. Right? So that's why you think of agricultural products that are grown and natural resources that are obtained in the country. Now, B is quite different. It is the one that is used when you have foreign materials in the product. But what we're talking about here is qualifying for the agreement. So if you have foreign materials, they have to undergo some transformation under which they meet the rule of origin for your product. So C is more similar to A, actually. It is the one that is used for most manufactured products where it's all parts and materials from the U.S., or it could be from the other agreement country, the other country that's part of the agreement. So for C, what you're doing, instead of saying that all molecules come from the U.S., basically you only have to look back to the parts and material, the parts that are used in the machine. So imagine you're making a machine and you're bringing together all of these parts from different places to incorporate into the machine. Now, you can say, all of the parts were made in the United States. And if you can't say that, then you can qualify under C. But you don't have to go back to find out where the steel came from that went into the part that went into the machine. So you don't have to go back 2 steps to say, the steel came from the United States and that was put into the part, or the plastic came from the U.S. and that was that was incorporated into the part, which ultimately went into the machine. You don't have to go back that far. So C is a category used for most manufactured products where, you may know that the part was U.S. origin, but you may not know where ultimately the raw materials came from that went into making the part. So we're going to talk next about B, the rule of origin, when you have foreign materials. Rules of origin, now again, they only apply to the foreign non-agreement content. So, as I mentioned, if it's only U.S. products, then you only need to figure out the qualification for the foreign content. And again, each rule is product specific. It may require a shift, a tariff shift, a change in the tariff classification, which in other words is a change in the Harmonized Tariff Code. The rule may also require a certain amount of regional value content in the product. The rule could require both of these, but that's what I mean by the rules being product specific. Some of them only require A, some require B, some require A and B. So you really have to know your harmonized code, look up the rule that applies to your harmonized code. Here's an example. And this is an example of something where every material, everything that went into this cupcake is being imported. It's coming from another country. But the cupcake can still qualify. So in this example, step number 1 is finding the HS code, which is 1905.90. And here, step number 2 is finding the rule of origin that covers this HS code. Now, the rules of origin, they can really be kind of cryptic and hard to understand. But when you look at the rule of origin, you're going to look, it's almost always in the left-hand column, and you're going to look for the range under which your code would fall. So if you had 1905.90, you're going to look for something that has 1905 in it, right? So here, in this example, the range is 1902 to 1905. So this one is the one that would apply to this product. And then, to the right of that, there's going to be a phrase, and what this phrase is saying is telling us what has to happen to the foreign materials in order for the final product to qualify under the agreement. So, interpreting this phrase below, the cupcakes can qualify if all of the imported components are not from Chapter 19. So you see where it says a change to the heading. And remember, the heading is the first 4 numbers. So that's why it just has the 4 numbers of 1902 and 4 numbers of 1905. So a change to 1905 in our example from another chapter. So the chapter is the 2 digits, remember. So what this is saying is that any foreign materials that are part of this product, the cupcake, cannot be from Chapter 19. Now, you notice that this rule of origin only has, I'm going to go back, it only has a requirement for A. It only has a requirement for the tariff classification change, a tariff shift. It doesn't have a regional value content requirement. Now, further with this example, here are a list of materials that were imported from another country and that were part of the cupcake. and I've listed the HS codes to the 4-digit level for these different materials. And you can see the first 2 digits of each one. None of them are 19, right? They're all different chapters. We have Chapter 11, Chapter 21, 18, 28, and Chapter 4 for the eggs. Now, because they're all not from Chapter 19, and these are the only inputs, then the cupcakes can qualify. This is just a simple example to show you what it looks like and what you're looking for. Now, if you have some very minor materials that are foreign included in your product, and they do not meet the rule of origin that applies to your product, your product may still qualify under the agreement under what's called a de minimis rule. And this allows up to 10% or 7% of the product to be non-qualifying. So if you add up all of the non-qualifying materials and they're 10% or less, the difference is 7% is for NAFTA, it's 10% for all of the other agreements. So if you add up all of the non-qualifying materials and they're 10% or less, for example, of the total price or the total value, then you can still get in under the de minimis rule. Okay. Again, rules of origin, for this type of agreement, they are product specific, and they may require one or both of these types of, they may have one or both of these types of requirements, regional value content or tariff shift. Now, the regional value content requirement, we're going to go over this, and I'm going to explain basically what it means. And there are always going to be 2 types of regional value content. So in NAFTA is different from all of the other ones. In NAFTA, you have the option of qualifying using net cost. Under net cost, the U.S. content has to be above 50%. So you're basically adding up all of the costs incurred in the United States, and if they're 50% or more, then you can qualify. And you have the option of doing transaction value. So in that case, you're starting with the transaction value and subtracting any foreign materials. And if you're left over, if you're subtracting foreign materials, what's left would be all of the U.S. content. And if the leftover U.S. content in that calculation is over 60%, then you can still qualify. So in transaction value, you're starting with the invoice value, right? And you're subtracting any foreign content. And what you're left with is the U.S. content. As long as that's over 60%, then you've met that rule. But that rule only applies if it's listed as a rule for your product. Remember, in that example, there was no regional value content requirement. Now, for all of the non-NAFTA regional value content calculations, there are also 2 options, but they're a little bit different. They're called the build up and the build down. The basics of these are really the same, though. The build up method is where you're adding up the costs that are incurred in the U.S. So it's very similar to this net cost, right? The difference is in the percentages, whereas for NAFTA it's 50, here it's 35, and the reason there is that difference is that there are different things that can be included. Right? So for this build-up method, there are things that you can include in NAFTA that you cannot include in these agreements as part of the cost incurred in the U.S., like a lot of indirect costs. Now, build-down method here is it's just like the regional value content transaction value method here, where here in NAFTA it's 60%. Here in these other agreements it's 45, but it's really the same methodology basically, where you're starting with the transaction value and you're subtracting the foreign materials, and then what's left over has to be at least 45% of the transaction value. And again, the reason there's such a difference in the percentage rates has to do with the things that can be included in the calculation and things that cannot be included. Now, I don't want to get into too much of the technicalities, because these calculations only apply if the rule of origin includes this option or this requirement. And you can find information on what to include and what not to include on export.gov/FTA if you need it. Hopefully you wouldn't need it, but if you do need it, then you can email me and I'll give you my contact information and we can figure it out. But remember, it may not even be required, and this is only part of the type of agreement where there are product-specific rules, right? So here again, there are two types of agreements. In the first type, you have the generally applied rules where you always have to meet substantial transformation and value added. In the product-specific rules, you may have one or both. You may have one or the other, or you might have both. Now you've determined how to qualify. I can't. Hopefully, if you get anything out of this webinar, hopefully you'll know. One thing you'll know is that if it's all U.S. content, it automatically qualifies. The next is that you definitely need to know how to certify that the product qualifies. And earlier, at the very beginning, I mentioned how the agreement NAFTA and with Israel are a little bit more restrictive as far as the certifications that are required. Basically, what I mean is that a certain particular document is required under these agreements. Now here, I include Jordan on this list because for Jordan, and that was also one of the earliest agreements, for Jordan, you have to use a generic certificate of origin. So if you can get a generic certificate of origin, that's what's required for Jordan. But for NAFTA and Israel, there is a specific form that is required. For all of the other agreements, it's a lot more open. What you can use is a lot more open. Like you can use a company letterhead, you can use a form if you like, but in these other agreements, one important difference is that the importer has to declare that the product qualifies, and then the foreign customs agency can ask for documentation. So it's not really necessary to have the documentation ahead of time. Now, I've heard stories that some foreign customs agents are requiring it in advance or, upon clearance from customs, but technically they're supposed to only require the document upon request. Now, I'm going to show you the NAFTA Certificate of Origin. A lot of people have difficulty with this. It's a pretty short form. There are some specific things you should know about it. This is a self-certification, but it is certification to a government authority, so you definitely want to make sure you know what you're doing. There is a blanket period under the NAFTA certificate, which just means that it was just asking what period of time you'll use this for, and it can be up to 1 year if you're shipping identical products to the same customer or the same importer. So you can put a year in that box from 1 year to another year. And let's see. Next is I want to point out. It's hard to see on here because it's a little small, but column number 7, you have preference criterion. I mentioned before the different criterion, A, B, and C, and NAFTA has a couple more that normally don't apply. But that in that box you would put the letter code. Column 8 asks, it just says producer. And what this is asking is just a yes or no question, testing whether you are the producer or not. And you would put yes if you are, or if you're not, you would put no, and then you would put a letter code. Right? And the letter code would signify how you know that the product qualifies. So you might know that the product qualifies because you have a document from the producer, or you might know the qualification just based on your own knowledge, but that means you don't have documentation. So there is an instruction page which hopefully should help you fill it out. And net cost is only something that you're going to use if you're doing a net cost calculation as part of your qualification. So earlier, remember under NAFTA you have some rules that require a regional value content, and you have the option of using net cost or transaction value. If you use net cost, then you're going to put yes here. If you don't use net cost, you're going to put no. Okay. For the Israel FTA certificate, you actually have to use a specific form. I should have mentioned that for NAFTA, you can get that form online for free. It's easy to find. But this Israel certificate, you actually have to get it from an authorized authority, which is normally an American Israel Chamber of Commerce, or you can get it from one of these two companies, and you actually have to purchase it. You can purchase like a book of them more inexpensively than purchasing them singly. But you have to use this particular form with the green background. Okay, so back to the steps. We've gone through all of the steps. I want to reemphasize the certification requirements for other FTAs besides NAFTA and Israel. You basically just have to provide certain pieces of information, but the format can be almost anything. As long as you provide the correct information, then you should be fine. Now, other points to note that there is a requirement for direct shipment, or if the product is going through a third country, it cannot enter the commerce of the third country, meaning It has to remain under customs control or in a bonded warehouse or a free trade zone, something like that. Next is record keeping. You have to keep your records. Now, the NAFTA requires 5 years. Others require 7. It doesn't hurt to keep an extra couple of years, but just know that you want to keep your records in case you're audited by customs. And again, we have a lot of market research available. We can help you find foreign customers, and you would have a price advantage over other over competitors from other countries where there's no free trade agreement. But you need to know what your tariff benefit is and how to determine whether your product qualifies. And then also, if your product doesn't currently qualify, maybe you can make a little bit of a change in the processing or the sourcing of your materials, and then qualify and take advantage of the tariff benefits. Here's my contact information. You can contact me if you need help. And I want to open it up to questions. I know we're running late. We did start late too, but in case there are questions, operator.
Yes, thank you. And if you'd like to ask a question at this time, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name when prompted. To withdraw your request, you may press *2. Once again, to ask a question, please press *1. One moment for the first response, please. Dennis, your line is open.
Yeah, my question is, Tony, can you please repeat where you find if something requires regional value content or tariff shift? Where is that in the HTS code, or how do you determine that again?
That's right. Well, it's in the rule of origin, which is part of. You can find it in the U.S. Harmonized Tariff Schedule. If you go to, well, there are two ways to get to it. You can go through export.gov/FTA, and you can look at for each agreement. There's going to be a page for each country, and then you'll be able to get to the U.S. Harmonized Tariff Schedule. And the U.S. Harmonized Tariff Schedule is a very good resource for all trade agreement information. It's 600 and something pages, and it has a section for each agreement. And then it describes, well, it has a list of all of the rules of origin.
Okay, so if I go in there to a specific tariff number, it'll tell me if regional value content or tariff shift is required?
Yes, that's right. You'll look for your specific tariff number. First you need to find the section for the agreement that you're looking at. And then you look for the Harmonized Tariff Code, and that's where it will tell you the rule of origin, which will have whether it has a regional value content or tariff shift requirement.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
The next question is from Mitch.
Yes, if we do get some content from around the world, let's say there's some bilateral agreements between where we source some of our product from and countries we're looking to export to, is it possible to look at those bilateral agreements and somehow get a tariff exemption on that?
I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure what you mean.
Let's say we're sourcing products from different areas in, Central America, let's say.
Right, Central America. Okay.
And we're turning around and exporting to other areas in Central or South America that may have bilateral agreements with the countries of source.
Right.
Is there any way for us to tap into, get tariff relief on those products because of the fact that there's bilateral agreements between the source country and the country we're exporting to?
Yeah, I mean, Central America, maybe that's not as well. Maybe just because the Central American countries besides Panama would be part of our agreement. So let's say you're getting something from Costa Rica, selling it back to Nicaragua, back to Nicaragua.
Right.
It would still be under the agreement. So anything that you source from an agreement country would qualify as, originating, and so you would have the tariff benefit still.
But that example's within CAFTA. What about different bilateral agreements?
Well, let's see. You buy something from,
let's say, Israel and export it to Argentina, and I know that Israel and Argentina have a bilateral agreement.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that a lot of agreements would have they would have something that says, if you get something from, I know some of them do. I'm not really that familiar with those other bilateral agreements.
Right.
Yeah, and it's definitely something I could look up if you send me an email.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
I show no further responses at this time.
Any other questions?
Just received one other question. One moment. Comes from Chantel. Your line is open.
Yes. I want to know if we're going to have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, I can send that out.
Okay, thanks.
There are no further questions.
Okay, no further questions. Remember, we have some upcoming webinars, and I hope you take advantage of those. And keep my contact information in case you have questions. Or, I know dealing with the free trade agreements can be a bit technical. Hopefully, it wasn't too bad for you, and I try to give you a feel for how to deal with it and figure it out if you run across any of the more technical aspects. But I really appreciate all of your attention. Thanks very much. We'll end the webinar here. Thank you, operator.